welcome and thanks for coming tonight. For those who don't know me, my name is Steve Schwartz. I run the LSAT blog. I'm also the host of the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast. And tonight I'm joined by Sydney Montgomery, Harvard Law grad. How are you doing, Sydney?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much, Steve, for having me. My name is Sydney Montgomery. I am the owner and founder of S. Montgomery Admissions Consulting, a full-service consulting company. I work with 9th through 12th graders through the college application process. And then, of course, I work with law school students through, the law school application process. I graduated from Harvard Law in 2018. I've been doing consulting since 2012. I'm a member of the IECA. I'm actually the Independent Educational Consultants Association. I'm on the graduate school committee and the ethics committee, and I love what I do.
Nice. Very cool. So I'm glad that we connected. I'm glad that we have the chance to have this conversation as well. I feel like we really clicked when we were having a get to know you call a couple of weeks back. And I thought it'd be fun for us to just kind of talk through some of the recent changes in the LSAT and admissions world, since I don't think we've really covered those together on a deeper level. And I know that you've been tracking things pretty closely in your work. I've been tracking things very closely on mine as well. But I thought it'd just be fun to kind of talk through the things and see what we think about it all.
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. So the flex, what's your take on the flex?
The flex, in some ways it's actually kind of good, right? Like it's 3 sections instead of 5. I have a short attention span. So like, I feel like that works a little bit better for me. I feel like we're going to be flex for a long time. I was actually talking to a student earlier today and I was like, talking about the flex, and he's not in the United States. And so, his country's maybe doing a little better. And I was like, yeah, as long as the United States is like under the COVID situation, I think there will be a flex option somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, it's the number one market for LSAC. And so even if other countries handled COVID better and they could handle it in person, what about the US, the number one market? It is primarily used in North America. So they've got to figure out something for these folks. And I mean, I definitely agree. I think the flex is a more pleasant experience. But my thought is, number one, how do they deal with the experimental section? That's the one thing I can't get my head around. They're going to have to modify their thing with no bathroom breaks. They're going to have to allow a bathroom break after section 3. Then they'll do a 4th section, maybe a 5th, and back to the old length and make their experimental random. They can't keep digging into their pool of old exams that are undisclosed.
Yeah, I think the thing with that, I mean, and you see it across different test prep companies, right? ETS, College Board. I think that we haven't quite mastered the long at-home test. I mean, I think of like the theory of like you could take the bar exam at home, maybe, like that is kind of being floated around. I don't know. I mean, I feel like I think they're going to try to run flex with the 3 sections as long as they can. I think it makes sense because they're not running to some of the issues that, College Board has had, ACT I think is pushing back their stuff, so the other test prep companies, I think that are looking at longer exams are running into more and more issues. So I actually think that if they can, they'll probably have a flex option, through the end of the year. I think it does get murky when you start having in-person and flex options, because then you are kind of looking at 2 different testing situations. I think as long as everyone is taking flex, then it's a little bit more contained. And maybe that's just the way that they go. Everyone just takes the flex and the in-person is a thing of the past.
Yeah, that's kind of where I see it happening, at least for this calendar year. I agree that probably August, October, November, all going to be flex. There's no December exam this year. There's no September either. They're going to announce August. They've got to announce it within the next couple of weeks. I can't see them doing it in person, especially when more and more law schools are going online only because they're admitting there's a problem they can't resolve this semester. I don't think anything will be that different in October, which is only about another month away, August 29th to October 3rd. Not that big a gap. November, same deal. But one thing I do want to touch on that you said, which is that for them to administer in-person and flex simultaneously, that would be like confusing for admissions. Because as you said, they are different in nature a little bit. But let's say if scores are good for 5 years, then those taking the flex in 2020 are still compared against those who took in-person in 2019. And maybe, fingers crossed, those who take it in-person 2021, hoping COVID is better by then.
Although in some cases, right, it is, I mean, you're always taking a different test. I can imagine, the test, there was that lawsuit, where they're going to have to change the logic games anyways because, of the student who sued, because he was blind. And then, so I feel like the LSAT was already changing. Like, it was already going to be substantially different. We were already going to run into this issue. I think this is adding another layer to it. But, the tests don't stay the same from year to year, of course, from administration to administration. Sometimes I think it gets harder or easier. I think, that if everyone is taking the digital LSAT that year, I think that's fine, that's contained. I think if you had an in-person and an LSAT, well, then you're looking at a swatch of, let's say, August 2020, and that one test looks completely different. And I feel like that is too much of a, of a difference of a spectrum.
Maybe, but I see the problem really being just for LSAC to administer in person and online simultaneously, because they've got issues with ProctorU, and that's getting better with each administration. Right. They've also got issues in person with proctors, and the logistics of booking test centers being overbooked, getting the tablets from place to place. They had difficulty managing all of that alone, managing ProctorU alone. So all of that together, I think it's probably just too much to deal with.
I think together would be an absolute nightmare, and they're the only test, right? So you can't lose faith in LSAC, because what are you going to do?
That ETS wins with the GRE.
That's true. And nobody really, really wants that to happen.
No. And one thing since you mentioned it briefly, the logic games being removed, there's been a lot of talk about that. And I'm not sure exactly where it stands, but we were debating this a lot in the past, back in the fall when the news was first coming out, us and the LSAT side of things. There's ambiguity about what exactly LSAC agreed to. So we don't know if games are going away altogether, or if games will only go away for a certain subset of test takers, or whether the research around that will be finished within 4 years, or it will actually change within 4 years. Yeah. Nobody really knows anything about that. I just know I'm going to get some questions at some point about this.
Oh,
so I want to stave those off a little bit.
Of course. And I will say that, my own personal speculation is that they're not going to get rid of the games. They will probably do a whole lot of research to justify why it is now equitable, but I don't think they're going to get rid of it completely.
No, they are very stuck in doing things a particular way. It's very difficult to move them. It took a pandemic to move them online. It took the GRE competition to move them to digital.
Yeah.
So I think it'll take a while. And I spoke with the plaintiff's attorney in that particular case, and it seems like he wasn't totally sure what he agreed to. So the importance of reading carefully and interpreting things, we'll see what happens there. I do want to ask you one thing, though, because it just, I get questions on this all the time. And my understanding from admissions is that they view flex scores the same as regular 5-section exam scores. Is that your understanding as well?
Yeah, it is. And probably some of that is political, right? They trust LSAC, and they want to continue to have that faith in LSAC. It's a good relationship. So, but I think, it's the same exact tests, questions, types. It's 2 sections less, but it's ultimately the same. I think most law school deans I've talked to, absolutely, they have no problem taking the flex. They don't see it any differently.
Yeah, same. And by the way, folks, feel free to ask questions as things come up for you, and I'll do my best to work them in. One question I had for you, just briefly, since you mentioned that you were on the ethics committee of the graduate admission counselors, and I know this wasn't on our agenda for tonight, but if you had any comments about all the varsity blues stuff.
I do. So I'm a new member to both the ethics committee and the graduate school committee. I'm really excited about that. Do I have comments on the varsity blues? So many comments. I think it's completely damaging to our profession, right? I don't write essays for kids. I don't do anything unethical, right? We have a code of ethics, of principles of good practice as consultants in the IECA and through, all of the other organizations. There's NACAC, there's HECA, there's a lot of them. When you're looking for consultants, you definitely want to try to see if there's what professional organizations they belong to, because we stand by principles of good ethics, which really, even prohibit okay, if I have maybe I'm working at a university and, if there's a conflict and having to disclose that, the bar is really high. I think, I care about kids a lot. So for me, the saddest part of the varsity blues scandal was, man, it must suck that your parents really didn't believe you could do it on your own. That kind of hurts, and, a lot of the kids, some of the kids were complicit, some of them were not, but it's learned behaviors, right? Even if they were complicit, they're 15, 16, 17-year-old kids. If they've been taught, this is the way to get through the world, of course, that's the way they're going to try to get through the world. Not to say they're completely blameless, but I think really the parents are really, like, I think they've really damaged their kids. It's awful. It's really awful. And I don't like that it caused a lot of mistrust in the public of consultants, because actually I think that they can increase access. I work with mostly actually minority women. I'm not exclusively, but most of my law school clients are minority women. And I think, I'm the first lawyer in my family. Having guidance is important. Like, you just don't know some of these things. And, sometimes it can be hard to find someone to listen to you and to help you with your writing, or to, help you make those tough decisions. And so I think there's a lot of benefit, both on the college side and the law school side. And when people engage in that kind of like illegality, it really sets us back.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's like different shades of it, right? Like, you have people who are blatantly looking to cheat the system by bribing proctors or bribing people to write letters on certain things that you haven't actually done. But then there's things that I think happen on a much more regular basis. Things like people asking you to write a personal statement, people asking you to draft something for them. I've had people ask me we have a conversation. Then they want me to write a draft for them. It's like, no, you write the draft. You write the draft. I don't want to write your draft for you. That's going to be my voice. And I'm not interested, frankly. But to help someone else steer them in the right direction is very different than you being the one steering the ship.
Yeah. And I'm pretty, as a lawyer, I'm pretty clear in my contracts and my agreements. But the other thing that's important to me is I was an English major at Princeton, and I firmly believe that a lot of Americans don't know how to write anymore, which is truly sad. So I actually like to teach writing skills, like especially to my high schoolers. I'm like, so talk to me about why that sentence is grammatically incorrect. Like, I could fix it. I could tell you what it is, but I'd rather you learn, because not only, of course, is it your own work at that point, but then you're going to learn those skills for college. And especially like when I get law school students that don't have strong writing skills, like, you're going to need to write in law school. So like, let's learn it right now. That way you'll be more successful when you get there.
Yeah. Yeah. What was your personal law school admissions journey like? We had a question in the chat about your LSAT journey, your applications. Like, okay. What was that process like for you? Because Harvard Law, obviously, nothing to sneeze at.
Thanks. It's interesting. I've had a very varied arc. So I decided I wanted to be a lawyer when I was 8, specifically a family lawyer when I was 8. And so I really wanted my parents to adopt. I have a sister who's 15, but I was an only child until I was 11, and I'm a military brat. And I just decided that, adopting was the way to go. So I'd have an older sibling, so I wouldn't have to go through things for the first time. Very self-interested. And they said no. They said it was, I don't remember. It was just too difficult or too complicated. They weren't interested. And I got really interested in the foster care system. And, to me, I was like, well, okay, there's all these kids who need homes, and there's all these people who have homes. I don't understand. So I really thought that I wanted to be a child advocate. Went to Princeton. I was one of the first students in my high school to go to an Ivy League, which, thank God for my teachers. I was public schooled through and through, and they really helped me. And so I think that's also what inspired me to kind of go and get into consulting, because I just started giving back to my church and my high school, and doing a lot of workshops and really dismantling some myths. But when I was making the transition from Princeton to Harvard, well, I'll say I did one summer at a big law firm. They had like a paralegal internship, just to solidify the fact that I did not want to work for a big law firm. It was very important. And that summer that was the summer I studied for the LSAT. So I took an internship in Boston because I couldn't afford to do an unpaid internship. So that one was paid, and I had never been to Boston before, but took myself right there, stayed in an Airbnb for 3 months.
Wow. Commitment.
I didn't really know exactly what I was doing, but I moved to East Boston, and I worked downtown, and I had this LSAT. I did an LSAT course, and I basically studied a little bit during the time I was supposed to be working, definitely.
You have to.
Yeah.
Get those hours wherever you can.
Yeah. And I like the online class format because I'd listen to a video while I was making breakfast, on the T to work at home. I would do, I did 2 or 3 hours a night, and then I'd watch 2 or 3 hours of Parenthood. I binge watched all the seasons that summer. It's an amazing show. That was my reward. And I didn't have a lot of friends because I just kind of moved there for the summer, but I made a checklist of all the like sightseeing places in Boston I wanted to go to. So that's what I did on the weekends. And then I wrote my personal statement with the help of my pre-law advisor, who she's no longer at Princeton, but she was phenomenal. And she taught me basically a lot. I bought these 2 books. I think one was like on JD admissions, and, you know, one was like all those like, you know, 55 successful personal statements or whatever. And just kind of muddled through it with my advisor, but she really like did a heavy hand holding and like walked me through and taught me basically a lot of what I know about, or the foundation of what I know about law school admissions. And, you know, I applied as early as I could. And I always tell students this, I'm like not ashamed of being like lower income. So I also basically wrote all the deans and I was like, hi, my name is Sydney. I'm a senior. I would love to apply to your school, but finances are such that I cannot do that. I would appreciate any assistance you can give me. So, you know, I kind of got through that way. The LSAT turned out really well. I took it one time and then I was done with it. We were just one and done. I like tried to negotiate like military discounts with the company. But yeah, I did a practice test every single Saturday. At the exact time, I practiced what I was going to eat, what I was going to drink. It's like funny because I actually I had undiagnosed ADHD and I didn't realize it. So like the tests make me really tired. So I like realized that I needed like half a cup of coffee and half a thing of Red Bull, and like that was like my drink. And what my snack was going to be. And like, I just kind of got it down to a science. Cause when I first started taking the tests, I was like falling asleep in section 2. It was not good.
Nah. But it sounds like you found out the right rhythm where like you got the ratios down, you have the timing down, down to the letter. And that simulation is really important. That's awesome that you did that.
So important, you know, because when I went to go do it and I like drove, I think I took it at like Mercer Community College in New Jersey. I like drove there like the weekend before just to like get a lay of the land or whatever. Like I was like, as many things as you can like practice, you should practice. Like nothing should be brand new on test day. Absolutely nothing. And then, you know, I started getting like letters like in October, like November. And then I got my last letters in like January.
Sweet. Wow, you got it done fast. You got it done right. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Like, I'm so down with the simulating test day. I made a whole series of videos in my course just about all the details of simulating test day. Yeah, no, it's so important. And like half of those videos are irrelevant because it's Flex now. So if it's ever in person again, that stuff like going to the test center actually becomes meaningful. But there's versions of that with ProctorU, with the Flex, testing out your system beforehand, getting your desk environment laid out properly. So much of your story, I think, could still be applicable to those taking the LSAT now, even if it's Flex for them.
Yeah, and I used the same process when I started. Okay, I didn't take a practice bar every other weekend. I only took 2. But it's the same like theory with the bar exam. I had to figure out, okay, how do I, like, what am I doing with these breaks and this time? Because it's so long. You know, so I think as much as people can simulate these tests, the better. Yeah,
for sure. I was wondering, I've been talking about this a little bit just to shift gears. I've been talking about the changes with COVID and how it's affecting admissions, what the cycle finishing up might look like, and then what's going to happen this fall for those looking to start fall 2021. And I've got a theory about this I want to share with you and get your take on this.
All right, let's do it.
I think there are 3 reasons why those applying this fall to start the next fall are going to have a more competitive cycle. Mm-hmm. I think the first thing is 2020 is an election year. People get really riled up about Trump with good reason. Yeah. And not to get too political here, but people do get passionate about Trump and his reelection potential. And they're engaged civically. They're debating politics. Secondly, we've got massive unemployment numbers. So the opportunity cost of waiting it out is pretty, what else are you going to be doing?
Right.
Then finally, Black Lives Matter is yet another reason people are civic-minded, civically engaging in policy and politics debates. Mm-hmm. So they're thinking about going into law to change the system. So for all those reasons, I think there's going to be a spike in people applying. What's your take on that?
I also think there's going to be a spike in people applying. I think it's going to be a 2-year spike. I think all the reasons that you said are correct. I'm going to add on kind of like what we saw in 2008 with the recession. When the economy goes down, historically, law school applications go up. Now, I think part of me thinks that not the 2020-21 cycle, but the 2021-22 cycle might actually be the more competitive of the two, because I think some people have, maybe lost their jobs or, in this period where they're like, shoot, I have to do something else. But they may not be all together, right? Like to apply this fall, they've just kind of realized that they need to make the shift. And so they're going to be looking towards next year. But generally, I think when the economy goes down, people are really looking to find that stability, and they're looking for, okay, well, let me go back to school and let me defer my loans, if they have them, how do I come out of this situation and I'm more stable than I was now? So yeah, I definitely think it's going to be an increase.
Yeah. Yeah. And I could see that also. I actually posted about this online. Somebody commented, well, if you just got engaged in things early June, then how are you going to get all your applications in LSAT done by October, November? Theoretically, it's possible.
Totally possible.
It's possible. And I think people can and should do that if they want to, because why waste a year? But if people need to retake the LSAT or need some time to get everything together, especially with COVID issues around geography and moving,
right.
Although law schools might be online, they might want to take a little bit more time to make that happen. So I could see why this would be a 2-year spike. It could be distributed between these 2 years, but with unemployment being so high, I could see a lot of people saying, well, might as well go now and delay things for 3 years.
Right. And I mean, you do, unfortunately, the way that, it works, I'm not that I'm advocating taking out more debt, but you do get to take out a personal living loan when you go back to school. So if you are looking at high unemployment right now and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills, that's kind of a way for you to get, it's debt, but it's a way for you to get money to kind of make ends meet if that's what you're looking towards. And I absolutely think, if you started in June, you could totally take the August through October LSAT. You don't have time to take it twice probably, but if you were having a high diagnostic and you were ready to take it, you could be ready. You could hustle.
Yeah, and you could do November. You could even do January. And what are your people ask me this a lot about is January too late? And I typically say November is preferable, but January could still be okay if your LSAT was higher. What do you think about that?
I might be a little extreme. So
That's fine.
I typically say try not to do past September, October. I mean, if you must do November, do November. Otherwise, I think it depends on what your goals are, right? So I have people across the spectrums, I don't just help people get into elite schools, basically across the spectrums. And so, and I know because I wanted to come back to Maryland. So, I applied to the T10, but I also applied to all the schools in Maryland because I wanted to practice family law. And I did, and I clerked right here in Maryland, and I practiced family law right here in Maryland. So I could have done a lot of that stuff, from a lot of different schools. So some people come to me and they're like, I don't want to move past these 2 hours from my house. I want to go to law school. And, the schools that are in those 2-hour radiuses are not, that competitive to get into. Okay, fine. November, probably even January may work. But if you're telling me, I really want to go T10, T15, T25, unless you tell me that in November or January, you're going to be able to get a 170 plus, and that is why you are waiting, I think you might do better just waiting another cycle, because the outcomes might be worth a year wait. I think the scholarship money goes quicker. I think it's just easier to get in. For some schools earlier in the cycle, they haven't filled their class yet. I know that I had a 2-week turnaround from 2 of my law schools. That's
incredible. People are waiting months a lot of the time.
Right. But I think if you get your apps in, and I push to try to get my student start apps in September and October. And if you get your apps in September and October, then I think you really should hear back from a lot of schools in November and December.
And there's that scholarship money too, which is huge. And when there's a lot more money in the scholarship bank account, they're going to be more liberal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you might come in and you might be the best applicant that they've seen so far. right? But in November and December, they've seen like a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly. Now, after reading personal statement number 1,000 or number 5,000 doesn't look the same as the first 50 or the first 100 that you're reading.
Exactly. And I mean, I don't say this to discourage people though. I mean, because some people, like, that's just the circumstances that they have, they are applying later in the cycle. But I always ask them, like, do you have a job that you can stay in for a year? Do you hate your job? Or are you okay? And if you're kind of okay, I think you should maybe think about waiting.
Yeah. And for those you talked about, taking it November, January, February, getting a much higher LSAT score. And for those who might be watching the recording of this later, I want to tell them that this is actually possible. You could take another 2-3 months and significantly improve your LSAT score, especially if you have fewer obligations, especially if you could study hardcore over winter break, during the holidays, Christmas, New Year's, longer if you're in college and have that full break between semesters. You could do a lot during that time. Yeah. And it might be worth it. It could be okay.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
All else being equal, if we're speaking now, end of June, then you might as well aim to do it this calendar year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I raised my score 14 points in like 4 months, I guess.
That's fantastic.
So, I mean, I think it's definitely doable. It's definitely I don't know if I had another 14 points in me, but it's definitely doable.
Yeah, and Parenthood helps. TV helps. And I'm not joking about that. When you said you were watching Parenthood, like, that's not my show. My wife loves that show. But I used to watch Chappelle's show. I used to watch Chappelle. I would this was like back when it wasn't even streaming. It was like DVDs. I would load the DVD onto my laptop and reward myself with like an episode of Chappelle's show after doing a chapter out of the textbook. Yeah. And back and forth and back and forth. And that motivation actually really kept me going.
You have to motivate yourself.
Yeah.
You really do. Because otherwise it can be a lot. And you just tell yourself, this is a season in my life that is going to bring me great rewards for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's worth investing in, even if it's a tough slog. Like, the payoff is huge. Yeah. And you just got to keep taking those little baby steps all along the way. And there's a lot of them for this whole process. The LSAT's a whole beast. The applications are another side of things. Yeah. But there's a million little parts. And if you can break it up, then it becomes a lot more manageable. And that's what I do in my study plans, breaking it up: games, reasoning, reading comp, all the different question types within that. And with the law school applications, it's the same thing, right?
No, it is. And I tell people, I cringe. So many people are like, I'm going to spend all this time on the LSAT and I'll like throw my personal statement together in like a week or 2 weeks. Like, I don't need time to do that. And I like cringe because I'm like, yes, your LSAT is super important, obviously. But so are your essays, right? Like, you really do need to take time for each of those sections. And some people cannot do the essays and study for the LSAT at the same time. There's no shame with that. But you kind of have to know yourself and you have to know what your day looks like. And you do have to sacrifice some things. I mean, I wasn't at like a very demanding internship, that was expecting a lot out of me or was paying me a lot. Like, if I had a real full-time job, that would have been a little bit more difficult, and I would have had to give myself a lot more time to get both of those parts of the application done.
Right. Now, having an accommodating workplace definitely helps. You can squeeze some more hours in the day to get this stuff done. I actually have a question in the chat from Judy about this, let's say you have a gap on your resume. Let's say that maybe you graduated college, you've got a gap where you're unemployed after graduating and you're submitting applications 3 to 4 months later, let's say from May to October. Then you're going to have a whole nother year with nothing on the books necessarily. You'll see what happens getting a job. How's that going to look to law schools given the COVID pandemic in particular?
Well, I think given the COVID pandemic, there will definitely be a lot more understanding and more flexibility. I mean, first off, that is something you should definitely talk about in your addendum. I mean, you never want to leave people with questions. So if there's something in your application that's going to make someone be like, I wonder why this happened, don't let them wonder. Tell them. I'm always like, you just don't want them asking any questions to themselves. So definitely tell them. But I would also say that there's things that you can be doing in this time, even if it's not like a job, right? Like, maybe you're taking Coursera courses, maybe you're volunteering. Like, there's a lot of virtual volunteer options. Maybe you're learning a new skill, or you're bettering your own time management skills, you're bettering your own research and writing skills. I think there's things that you can do that maybe you can't necessarily put, on a resume, Although, there are some courses you could. But there are things that you can say, on your addendum, like I wasn't employed, because of COVID. During my time, I did X, Y, Z, 1, 2, 3. I'm always like, your addendum should be explanatory, not excusatory. So explain what happened. And then it's nice if you say, this is what I did during my time. And
I like that.
Anything that, it doesn't have to be, maybe it's taking care of your grandmother. Maybe it's being a full-time, now you're like a teacher to a child that's home from school, K through 12, it doesn't have to be something that's, if your time is consumed with other things during COVID, that's okay. I think you just need to tell them what you're doing.
I hear that. And I'm going to get really real about this for a second, because I know that there's people here with us now and who will watch this later who are like in this exact situation. So let's say, hypothetically, student graduates college May 2020. Mm-hmm. They can't find a job. They don't even bother looking because it's the pandemic. They're like, I'm going to hammer out the LSAT because that's the number one factor in admissions. And I've got the time. I've got nothing but time all summer. I can devote to mastering the LSAT, taking it in August or taking it in October, and then applying.
Yeah.
Do they need to do something else on the side, like 5 hours a week on Coursera or 3 hours a week teaching ESL online? Or can they do something with family and then just write about it on an addendum? Do they need something that's super officially for their resume?
Well, so here's the thing. If you're talking about the kid that graduated in May and is applying in October,
yeah,
they might not even need an addendum. I mean, really, there's not really a gap on their resume, truly, because I don't think anyone really expects a college student to maybe get a job during the pandemic, but they can mention it. But I wouldn't see that as a huge gap. If it was a year plus, right, that would be a larger gap. The question comes down to whether or not they think that they might be on a wait list, because that is, people like to say, well, what are you doing? Update us, right? And if you don't have any updates, it's a little harder. But they absolutely can say, that they are the caretaker for someone in their family, that, maybe they've had to pick up a supermarket job because they're helping out their family financially. I mean, absolutely, that counts. If they've taken time to read, just to better their own self, that counts. I don't think they have to do something just for the resume. I never suggest people, especially not my high schoolers, not my law school applicants, I never suggest doing something just for the resume. You should do something that's fulfilling, that makes you happy, and that brings you closer to being a whole person. But I think there's something that you can do, hopefully, during COVID that brings you that kind of joy. Even if it's, I really got into yoga and I, bettered my mental health. I'm here for it. Right?
Yeah, YouTube videos. Yeah, yoga with Adrian. Yeah.
Love yoga with Adrian.
Yeah.
You're bettering your mental health so that when you go into law school, you know how to manage your stress. I think that sounds great. Nice.
No, I like that a lot. And then I could imagine that to bring it back to the application process, let's say they take the LSAT in October, they submit their applications then if they're going to be waitlisted, which many applicants are, then you could be, once October hits, you hit submit, you then spend some more time on these hobbies, maybe do an online course. Exactly. And those are helping to fill your time so that you can update them later and say, I got my certification in XYZ. Here's your little quarterly update.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's completely what I would do. I mean, if you don't have a job, I mean, it's a very tough position to be in, of course, but it does give you a lot of time once your apps are in. And if your apps are in early, another plus for that, then you really have a lot of time between October and April or whatever to, find something to do that makes you happy.
Yeah. And why wouldn't you do something with that time anyway?
Right,
There must be something. Yeah.
You probably will be doing something. You probably won't be sitting in your room, on your phone for, 12 months or whatever. You will be doing something. And I think that that can be put on the update.
That's cool. I like that. What about the personal statement? We got a question on that. Just personal statement. That's a big open-ended thing. What about the personal statement?
I love the personal statement.
How about COVID personal statements? How do you like personal statements that are about how you spent your time during COVID? I could imagine they're going to get a lot of those.
I don't love those.
I didn't think so.
It's hard, right? On the college side, there's a dedicated question for that hasn't fully happened on the law school side. So I think ultimately your personal statement needs to answer the question. In some ways, there's many different formats, but in some ways it needs to answer the question, why law? Why now? They need to be convinced that you're going to go through all 3 years and graduate. And you want to really focus on things that are personal to you. Like I stress, there should be a narrative element. They shouldn't see you as a person, because a lot of times they don't interview. So this is your chance to show yourself. So, talk about you, focus on you. Sometimes people want to focus on issues, focus on you. And really have good writing, have a few narrative elements, a couple stories, but really hone in on why it is that you are so compelled that you must go to law school and you must be a lawyer. Like at the end of my personal statement, or at the end of your personal statement, I want to know, this girl has to go to law school. That's it. She won't be able to do what she needs to do in her life without going to law school. It is the logical next step. And that's kind of how I, want people to think about their personal statements. Now, in terms of COVID, that also could be fodder for a diversity statement, depending on what it is. I advise everyone to write a diversity statement. I have a video on my YouTube channel about what a diversity statement is and why you should write one. Because it's really about diversity of thought. If COVID has had such an impact on your life that it's changed the way that you see the world, I think that could be a place for it there. If it's if COVID hasn't impacted the way that you see your life, but it's had such a dramatic impact on you, maybe you're studying, maybe you're financing, maybe it's changed some decisions that you've made, then I think maybe that can go in an addendum.
Nice. Now, there's one thing that you said that stood out to me, which was show that law school is the logical next step.
Yeah.
What if it doesn't really actually seem that way? What if you can't, even for yourself, you can't tie those pieces together in a compelling way where it's like, yeah, a lot of people are like, law school, what else am I going to do? Where it could end up being a great career move, but there could have been other things you do instead.
So, look, the reality is, in a lot of ways, there always could be something else that you do instead. Even if you think law school is the logical next step, if you really think hard about it, there's probably something else that could also maybe be an interesting step. So a lot of what I spend my time doing is I push my students. I push them and I drill them on the why law question. I think it's important for them to be clear before they step foot in a classroom why they're there. If they're not clear about why they're there, they may not be successful. I cannot tell you how many times I texted my friends during 2L being like, why am I here? Why did I want to come to school? Can we quit? I'm done. I'm over this. And it was like sometimes I had to read my personal statement, I had such a strong conviction and I relied on that conviction. No, Sydney, you wanted to do this for years. This is why you're here. And even though I'm not practicing right now, it absolutely was the right decision. And I would do it 3,000 times again. But if you can't find that conviction before you step on foot or in your living room, if it's online, it's going to be difficult for you because it's going to be hard. But I think I truly believe if you're thinking about going to law school, there is a why law deep inside of you. You might not fully know it. And so I would spend time really drilling so that we get there, so that it becomes the logical next step, so that you convince yourself in the writing process that you have to go to law school.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that it's so funny that people are making such a big investment in going to law school. I mean, you're spending months studying for the LSAT. You're spending months working on all the application pieces and all the different statements. Then you're going to spend 3 years of your life and hundreds of thousands of dollars in tuition and opportunity cost. It's worth taking at least an hour to write down and think about why you want to do this, or talk it out with somebody like yourself, or make a video or a voice memo or something just to get it out of your head and really think it through.
Yeah. It has to be I say, you have to get it to 2, maybe 3 sentences. You need to be able, that can't be obviously your whole personal statement, but I need to be able to ask you, hey, why are you going to law school? And you need to be able to tell me in if you were at a coffee shop and a stranger asked you, they're not going to give them a whole paragraph or 10 minutes.
It's like an elevator pitch. Yeah.
Right. An elevator pitch. You just need to be able to tell them quickly. And so you have to drill it down so you can get there.
Yeah. Well worth doing. This reminds me of all those books that have a little place for you to write in your own stuff. And I always skip those. I never actually write it in, but I think it actually is important to do. And I consider that more of the deep work that actually is really important that I used to put off to the side, but knowing your why actually can help you stay motivated and help you keep taking those little baby steps to move forward down the path, rather than just, my parents told me to do this, society told me to do it, for lack of a better option, I'm doing this, versus having a really compelling reason. And I think anyone who is civic minded or idealistic or just cares about things can probably find a way to make law school make sense for them if they actually wanted to do it, because there's a lot that's wrong in our world that requires fixing. But to get clear on your specific reason can help you stay motivated and then help you write a better personal statement in the end too.
Right. And it's okay if it started out as because I lost my job and I need to do something, or because my parents told me to. It just can't end that way.
Right. That's a really good point, actually. I like that, because I mean, life takes you down so many strange and random paths that if you're at point Z 10 years from now, it seems kind of circuitous how you got there.
Yeah.
But it could be a great ending point, and you could have a very compelling career path that has you doing work that you love.
Exactly.
Even if it happened for a random reason.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, honestly, a lot of things happen for a random reason, or like one little tiny event that set it off, but I think, I think an hour or 2 hours is so important for anyone. And like I said, they can talk to someone like me. They can talk to themselves in the mirror. They can journal it. It's just so important.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you mentioned a little bit about how setting foot in law school could actually be online. I know that obviously your alma mater, Harvard Law, is going to be fully online fall, fully online. What's your take on this situation with regard to the value of the importance of going in person versus online being okay, or maybe even being better in certain specific ways? What's your take on all of that?
Yeah. So I do kind of take a hard health line stance, which I know is super not popular in general.
It's just not fun. Stop being such a downer, right?
I'm bursting everyone's bubble. I just don't think it's safe to go back to school in the fall for any college or law school. I just don't. So I am happy, I guess, that Harvard is online. I'm not super thrilled that, the price is the same, but I understand professors, have to get paid and all that good jazz. I think it could work. I think they're going to have to be creative. Harvard is a big school, so I think it actually works pretty easily at most law schools. My section, I had 80 people in my section. Right. That's a big Zoom call. Yeah. It's real large. But, if your section is 20 people, I think, honestly, it might be even more interactive. It probably will be more interactive than some of my classes, because it can be kind of boring, depending on how long the cold call is, to just watch someone answer questions for 20 minutes. And then you're kind of you're looking at them, you're looking at your notebook, you're not really sure. I feel like they won't have 20-minute cold calls on a Zoom platform. I feel like cold calls will just get shorter. There will be more interaction. There will be, you can kind of see all of your classmates a little more. I don't know how all law schools are structured, but we have kind of the dome seating. So someone's talking behind me, I can't see them. I'm listening to them, but I can't see them, So I think there could actually be some benefits. A lot of my classes were seminars, and there were 8 or 10 people. I think that could be just as well on a Zoom call, because it's really about the discussion. The larger classes, I did take some that were 120, 140. That, I don't know. I think that's a pretty extreme, but that was mostly lectures. So I think you could just do asynchronous lectures and send them out, and have people engage in different ways. Harvard doesn't have grades. So participation in cold calls just in most classes were actually not part of the grade. So I think at other schools where participation is more graded, it could be a little bit trickier, but I think it's not as bad as people think it is. I really don't. It's not, we have as many clubs and stuff as on college, or that student life, it is a little bit different anyways.
Yeah, well, I bet that they'll have to change the format in certain ways, no question about it. I mean, to be in the spotlight on the big screen in Zoom for 20 minutes straight being hammered by the professor sounds terrifying and sounds traumatizing. I wouldn't want anybody to be in that situation. Nah.
Person either.
Nah. No, I wouldn't think so. So they'll have to change the format. But I imagine that a school like Harvard that was so early in announcing online, and with the resources they have and their commitment to quality, I think they would undoubtedly do a great job with it, at least relatively compared to some of the other schools.
Yeah, no, I do think so. I hope that they've been preparing for it. I know that there is always, an issue with technology, and, not everyone has the same access to reliable technology. There are going to be some inequities there. hopeful that will figure kind of how to figure that out for all students. But I think that it's better than having people say, start at school, get a lease, and then be told to get sent home. I think it's nice to just know, okay, some people are just not moving to Boston. That's cool. That's just like not what's happening. I think it will be hard in terms of clinics. Obviously, I think that's the biggest place where law schools will feel the online experience, because there's really no replicating that.
Right. No, it requires like in-person interaction, being there in the community and being able to work with people there, right? Yeah.
I mean, I know the law firm that I was previously at, we did hire a summer intern during COVID. So it's possible externships could still happen. And, you could still get some clinic experience virtually depending on placement sites. But I think that will be the hardest part.
Yeah. Have you heard anything about that, or is it still too early to say anything?
I haven't really heard a lot about it. I do know about some internships and externships, but I think that's mostly just up to the individual sites, employers. But I haven't really heard a lot about some clinics. I know we had a mix of policy and direct service clinics. So I presume the policy clinics could still happen without much of a hitch. But, I was in the food law policy clinic, which
interesting.
It was great. There's actually only 2 food law clinics in the country. It's us and Drake Law School in Iowa. And I actually got to go to Iowa.
Nice.
Which was pretty cool. Yeah, I had never been, and there was farms.
What's food law about? Is that like farming related stuff?
So it's on the Farm Bill, but it's also school food lunch. So I became an expert on food waste, especially in school foods. There's
But the whole pizza is a vegetable thing. Was that you?
Food waste is so crazy in this country. We waste so much food. I didn't even know. It's on date labels for things, urban gardening, which was pretty cool. What are the laws around that? We did a Mississippi Delta project. We did some stuff with indigenous populations. So there was a lot that went into it. It was cool, but there was a lot of travel and field trips. So I think that would have to clinics like that rely on travel would have to change a little bit, but some of the same policy things could still be happening.
Interesting. We got a question in the chat about clinics and internships and what goes into being a successful applicant for one of those. What's that like, the selection?
So that's going to vary school by school, right? And that's one of the things that I when I tell my students to research schools, there's, rankings, sure. But I also want you to research how many clinics there are, how many journals there are, and then how do you get on them? So at Harvard, not every journal, actually most journals are not competitive.
Really?
So there's the Harvard Law Review, super competitive. But then there's a lot of other journals you don't have to write on for. You can just kind of join, like a student fair. So I was on the Negotiation Law Review. I loved it. I got to do a really cool symposium with DeRay McKesson on ADR and Black Lives Matter, which was pretty cool. And so but I didn't have to try out or compete for that. I did for to get on the board and stuff like that. But, I think that's important that not every school has the same barriers. For clinics at Harvard, we didn't have to apply. It was like a class. There's the, Harvard Legal Aid Bureau, which is application, but then most of the clinics are like a class. So the same way that you kind of register for other things, there was a clinical registration period. I know for some schools, Fordham and some other ones, I know that you do have to apply. And I think what they're really looking for is engagement and passion in whatever the clinic is. And of course, good grades, strong academics. But I think, students that are engaged in terms of interns, I think that's the same thing. They want to see that you're self-motivated. They want to see that you take initiative, that you, are going to maybe do something more than just what they're giving, or that you're going to contribute in a way that might last for the, the firm or the government organization that you're working for.
Very interesting. Wow. It sounds like lots of opportunities at these clinics, and I hope that they can make it work, at least for some of the journals.
Yeah.
With the online experience.
Yeah. I think they will be able to. I think, I think people are still going to need help, right? Law firms didn't close.
Right.
AG's offices didn't close. People are still prosecuting and defending and all that good stuff, and they still need help. So I feel like they will still find a way to transition some of that stuff online.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of them are remote already anyway.
Right, exactly.
Nice. Well, we've been going for nearly an hour. This has been a blast. Is there anything you wanted to touch on that we didn't get to?
Oh my God, I can't believe it's been almost an hour. It's been fantastic. No, I mean, I think what would be interesting, kind of bringing it back to testing, like something that you said in the very, very beginning, right, is like, okay, if not the LSAT, then the GRE.
I have strong feelings on that.
Oh, well, tell me first what your strong feelings are.
I mean, I just don't really see what the GRE is doing here. I mean, I think that they certainly are very convenient with being offered nearly every weekday.
Yeah.
But I don't really see its relevance to law school to quite the same extent. I think that, especially your alma mater, Harvard Law, I don't think that there are studies related to its predictive value or predictive validity for first-year law school grades. I didn't find those studies very compelling because they were looking at very strong students who would do well on any exam you threw at them.
Right.
But the skills the LSAT tests, I think, relate much more closely to what you actually do in law school in terms of reasoning, analyzing text critically, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the GRE is more of a convenience, but thinking about like this whole thing between the LSAT and the GRE, and even kind of broadly testing, what I am hoping and what I'd love to get your thoughts on is like, I want to know where the future of testing is going, because studies and research have shown that they do disproportionately affect underrepresented minorities. I think the LSAT is a little better than on the college side, the SAT, but what are they showing? Are they really the true marker and predictor of, the ability to do well in school? I know I have friends who I went to Princeton with who struggled through the LSAT, and really smart students just could not master the LSAT. So I kind of am hoping that the pandemic, wishful thinking maybe, makes us take a pause and really look at what it is we're testing and whether there's other measures that we can be using. But then I, even myself, struggle to say, okay, if we took away testing, what would admissions look like? So I'm kind of interested in your ideas, thinking about equity and race and socioeconomic class, what is where do we go with testing?
Yeah, these are great questions. I don't talk about them that much, and it's not always easy to talk about them. Yeah. But a couple things I'll say first off is that for the undergrad level, I love test optional. I don't think the SAT and ACT are that important specifically. They're objective measures that can standardize things relative to different high schools with different grade inflation and all that. But when you're in undergrad, there's so many different career paths you're taking. Mm-hmm. And some of them aren't related to exams or graduate level education at all.
Right.
So I'm not sure how relevant those are. I think, if anything, people skills might be a much better predictor of future success in a lot of ways at the undergrad level. I think the LSAT in particular is important because of 1L and the bar exam, and the costs of flunking out are really high. So you're not doing anybody any favors, I think, if you open the doors to law school super wide, let people take out these big loans, and then if they can't succeed in 1L or pass the bar, that's a big problem for them.
Right.
The LSAT has some predictive validity, but I think like democracy, it's the best among the worst.
Right.
It's terrible, but better than all the others, that sort of thing. So if you could develop something that was a better predictor than the LSAT, I would love to see that. And I would support it 100%. People have tried to do that, but it hasn't really gotten too far. And I think any exam or any admissions criteria will be gamed by those who have money and have resources. We saw Varsity Blues, they made all their efforts there and were able to do so without too much trouble. The LSAT, at least I think, is better on that front in particular. But what I would really love to see is better free and low cost resources. I love Khan Academy in general, but I don't love their LSAT prep product in particular. And I don't love that LSAC didn't give them that much to work with in terms of a limited set of exams. So I'd love to see more from LSAC in terms of just opening the door and giving away all the exams for free, or putting together a better free resource.
Yeah.
And then I'd love to see that going all the way down the chain. And we know the College Board cares very little about this sort of thing.
Very little.
At least the new people at LSAC, they're really trying hard.
Yeah.
But I think these inequities with standardized tests and education, they go all the way back down the educational pipeline, all the way back to even the elementary level. And the fact that funding for education is local, but tax bases from town to town vary widely in their resources. Yeah. So I think you've got to start there.
Yeah. I think I would even like to see, I know that some colleges some do have like an LSAT prep that they do in-house, like as part of their pre-law programs. I'd love to see more of those. I know that some high schools you can take tests like, college prep, SAT prep or whatever as a class. I think that the more people get exposed to it for free earlier on, I think the better, because I think you're right. People can game the system with money. No matter how you slice it, you can't get around wealth. But I do care deeply about, equity and diversity and representation. And I know that, the representation at the law school level for minority students is not great. It has never been great. And, I think this is one of the ways that it does kind of hinder progress in that way. And so, I don't have the answers, but it's something that I think about a lot. Like, how do we increase, representation while still, like you said, making sure that the people that are going to law school are ready to go to law school, and that there are going to be people that can pass the bar. It's hard. It's a hard balance, but it's important that we keep talking about it and thinking about it, because if we don't keep talking about it, no one's going to change it.
Exactly. And it's up to folks like us to put together those resources and proposals, because we have the experience to make these things happen. Yeah,
absolutely.
Awesome, Sydney. Well, this was a blast. And before we sign off, let's share the best way for folks to get in touch with us. So you want to share your resources?
Yes, of course. And should I throw them in the chat as well?
Yeah, throw it in the chat. Why not? Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sure. So my website is smontgomeryconsulting.com, and I can be reached at info@smontgomeryconsulting.com. I have a YouTube channel that I will link in the chat as well. I also have a blog. I have a monthly newsletter. I'm pretty easy to get in touch with. I'd love to chat with anyone. I do free 30-minute consults. And then I can do, hourly. I have packages. I believe in affordability, so I can make consulting work with basically any budget.
Awesome, Sydney. Thanks so much for chatting with me. And folks on your end can find me, Steve Schwartz, over at the LSAT blog, as well as the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast. And so I'll just throw a link to that there.
Awesome. And someone reminded me that my Instagram, I didn't put it out there. It's
Instagram.
At Consulting. Nice. Definitely follow me.
Nice. All right, Sydney. Well, this was a blast. Thanks so much for doing this. Let's keep in touch.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Steve.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.